But I also think that women need to be honest and real about what life is like on a day-to-day basis, because it's only then we can realize that, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one here who's struggling or living this, life that feels chaotic or depressing sometimes, when you know that everybody's feeling this way, everybody's experiencing this. It's very comforting in a sense, and you feel like, even I read a ton of self, help empowerment books, personal growth, business growth books. And you realize that everybody has some imposter syndrome. Nobody really knows what they're doing. The people that become successful are the ones that just go for it and figure it out along the way. But when we see people that are very successful, we think, oh my gosh, they must be so much smarter than I am.
Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. All right. Welcome back to the And Both podcast. I am here today with Kristina Godfrey of Godfrey Social PR. And I am really excited to hear many, many things. I have many questions, but I would love for you to first introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm Kristina Godfrey. It's funny, I don't really put my middle name in there much, but I see it's up on the screen.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah. So I am a mom of three. I have three boys. I have a 19-year-old who's almost 20. I have a 17-year-old. It's the birthday today, and a 12-year-old. And they are all into basketball, and they're tall, and I'm the only woman in the house, and it's except for the dog. So it's can get to be a little much, but yeah, I run my own PR firm. I started it back in 1997, which is like eons ago, and started off in video games and then children's education, and then segued into baby and kid products once I became a mom. And it just really kind of took off from there. And that's our niche, but we also have brands in lifestyle and wellness and other areas, but we're kind of
so a whole spectrum.
Baby kids. Although I don't have babies anymore, so now I'm more into wellness and that kind of stuff.
I love it. It's one of those things I always wonder about, like people that own like children's like toy stores. Like, if you start a toy store when your kids are really little and then they get older and you're like,
yeah,
oh wait, I don't like need these things anymore. Do I still sell? Okay, I guess this is what I'm doing. So it's cool that you have a skill set and a business that can transition alongside of you. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I realized too that because we're known for the space of, baby and kid products, and we've repped some of the, best brands out there, that it definitely is something you want to keep. You want to keep your niche, but you can also, expand in it. We're really promoting products to a lot of women and a lot of moms, but, as we're not just moms, we're buying things for ourselves. And so we're really reaching the same woman, just in different ways.
Different stages. Yeah. And I know I saw I was looking at your website, you repped Aiden and Anae for their whole time, but until they were bought, right? Or acquired.
Right.
That's one of my favorite baby brands of all time.
I know. I had been gifted at my baby shower a box of swaddles when they had just launched, and they were the best things I had ever used. And that was for my second son. So that was 17 years ago. And I reached out to the brand and they said, oh my gosh, we had just hired a PR person who was with us just for a couple months. And then they ended up leaving because they got an in house job. And so we're looking for someone. So I started with them and stayed with them through the whole thing. And it was just an incredible experience. And
Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. I give a box of swaddles to every person who's having their first baby.
yeah,
It's like a standard. And then those bibs, my brother-in-law just had his first baby. His wife did a couple of months ago, and they had registered for like all these different kinds of things. And I was like, this is the one kind of bib. They are expensive. However, I have bibs that went through all four of my kids.
I
So
know
it's like you find something that works.
yeah, and they get better when you wash them. I still have my kids, blankies that they, the swaddles and they were like the little squares of the swaddles, and
Yeah.
I have those blankets all over my house still.
I love it. That's awesome. And so your boys they're home? Are all three of them at home now?
Well, so my oldest he graduated from high school 2 years ago, but he's pursuing a career in basketball. So he is holding out for a D1 offer. So he played for a junior college and they just finished. He was playing for East LA. And so we're hoping some offers come through. So he's home right now, but we're hoping he will be on his way in a few months. So it's kind of a
so you guys
path,
Yeah, you guys aren't like, we like basketball. You guys are like, we live basketball.
We do, which is funny because I was not into sports growing up. My whole family was like, I have two brothers and they were athletic, and I went to aerobics, I'd go for walks with my friends, hikes. I never played a sport. I wasn't into it. And my kids just they don't understand. They keep saying, well, what sport did you play in high school? No, I did not. But the fact that I got 3 basketball players is kind of funny. My husband's athletic, and my whole family that read and knit and do artsy things. And
so we just put a basketball hoop out in front of our house because my older son has been using one of those basketball hoops on his door.
Oh, yeah.
That he has, like those little ones. Mm-hmm. And I live in New England and we have the solid wood doors. So every time he's like slamming the ball in the door, I was like, I think it's time to put a real basketball hoop outside.
Well, I'll tell you, we have one of those and all my kids use them, and it's on my pantry door, and it's the most irritating thing. But they love it. And it's, so you're not going to get rid of that. Just
no,
the one outside. For some reason, they think that is so fun. They're, I can't even like, come on, dinner's ready. And they're, they have to keep shooting until they make it. And then they fight over it. And it was like the best toy ever invented, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be there forever, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
They'll all grow up and they'll all leave home and you'll be like, I can't get rid of it. Although every time they like slam the ball in it, you're like, I wish I got rid of that. Like,
it's funny. I have yet to actually try to shoot a basket into it. Maybe I'll have to do that.
That'll be good. They're gonna come home one day and you'll have like been training winner.
I'll be drinking my wine and shooting hoop. How old are your kids?
I love it. My kids are 11, 9. We just had some birthdays, and then I have a couple more coming up this week. So 11, 9, 6, and 4.
Oh, geez. Do you have a girl in there?
So I have girl, boy, girl, boy.
Okay.
Yeah. So the girls are 5 years apart, and the boys are 5 years apart.
Wow.
So it's kind of it's a good mix, good blend. Everyone can stand, everyone can walk without assistance. There's no more crawling. All of that. So we're moving into a new transition.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Like, amazing. How did I survive when you were running around after these little people that were always about to, endanger themselves?
Yeah, impale themselves. That's what I am. Just like, I just need you to be alive, and you just keep doing everything possible to not.
I know. They want to stick like knives in the outlets. They want to.
Hmm.
Go head over first on the couch. Oh my
I
God.
love it. And so I have everybody fill out a form because I just love to, it makes it easier for me to like organize things. And one of the things that you wrote on there was about not not getting swept up in the martyrdom of motherhood and that piece. And so that was one of the big questions that I wanted
Mhm.
to ask about and how what that looks like for you and what that looked like for you when your kids were younger because they are on the older kid side of the spectrum. So what did that journey look like for you?
You know, I don't think anyone really knows what kind of a mom they're going to be before they have kids. You know, you think you're going to, be this amazing mother and you're going to make all their food and you're going to, read stories to them and they're going to go to bed on time and all of that. And then my first son was super challenging for me. I mean,
Mhm.
for the first year, he was an angel, and then all hell broke loose. And the tantrums were just off the charts, and I was so out of like my depth. And so everything I thought it was going to be, it wasn't. You know, I'd try to sit and read a book with him, and he'd throw it across the room. You know, he didn't want to do any of
Mhm.
the things like he shattered every fantasy I'd had in my mind about what it was going to be like. And at the time, I had my own business. And so I had to pay a lot of attention to that as well. And, I realized that about 3 months after I had him that I had to get some help into the house to help me with him so that I could work. And, one thing leads to another. And I have another child. And I, I really my business really needed my attention, and so I feel like I kind of leaned into, hiring a nanny. I feel like I was always there for all the as a mom, you're always, there's just things you can't not
Right.
do, right? There's just, you're the one up with them in the middle of the night or whatever's happening. You're making them dinner, you're bathing them, putting them to bed. But during the day, I always felt when they were young that I didn't need to be the one at the park pushing them on the swing. Like I could have my nanny doing that. I needed to focus on my career because that was the time that I really needed to build it and grow. And so then our third child was sort of I really wanted a girl badly, and my husband was
Mhm.
fine with two boys, and I finally kind of let it go, and then I got pregnant, so it was kind of a surprise. And it didn't really make any sense because our lives were so busy and crazy as it was. But, here comes chance. And so I had full-time help. My business was super busy. So life was just like full on at that time. And I realized that I had to start, I had him when I was 41. So when you have a child and you're in your 40s, there's a big difference between having a child in your 30s. And I had been living on adrenaline, just pushing myself to, work and take care of these kids and just live this really full life. My husband and I are very social. We have lots of friends. We're going out to dinners. And so just we have on paper a lot of balance, but internally I feel that, I was just burning the candle at all ends. And so I think as I got into my 40s, I started really understanding and paying attention to myself and trying to unravel a lot of the stress and
Mhm.
damage I probably did to myself internally as far as my cortisol and that. So now things are different because I have teenagers, and I'm really actually grateful when I look back that I put so much effort into my business when they were younger and had the help then. And now I'm kind of on the other side of it where I have a lot of help in my business and I'm more available to my children now who are teenagers. And
Yeah.
if you think they're hard when they're little, I mean, teenagers are a whole different ball of wax. I mean, you've really got to be, you're not trying to keep
So you
them
could be
from
in it.
killing themselves every day, but what you're trying to, keep the problems get bigger, let's just say.
Yeah. I was just reading this article not that long ago about maternity leave and paternity leave. And now there's this notion of like leave for teenagers. So parents that when their kids move into their teenage years, parents are taking leave or they're downshifting for those years because of that, because of like having to drive and having to, wanting to like be there because of all of the, the terrible things you hear about on social
Oh, I
media. I
know.
mean, you don't have to hear about it. Like social media is generally pretty terrible and things like that. And it's like wanting to be in that space when they're in that space. And so I think that like what your path really matches kind of what they were saying about, you're not like, you don't have to necessarily be the one that is like changing a diaper, but they want you to be the one when they're talking about their like terrible day at school.
Yeah, I mean to be honest, back to what I said, I didn't know what kind of mother I was going to be. I realized, and this is going to sound terrible, but I love babies. Like I was really good at
Mm-hmm.
the 0 to, you know,
The like floppy kid.
yeah, when they didn't really go anywhere or do anything and everything was a little more predictable, you were on a schedule. But once
Yeah.
they start running around and throwing tantrums, that was just a really hard time for me because I always had so many things I wanted to get done in a day with work. And, I've tried to prioritize, working out and like keeping up with my friends. So I've never been the person that just throws myself all into one thing. I have to like fill all my buckets. And so that
Yeah.
would just stress me out so much if I was just waste in my mind, I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting time on this like temper tantrum for an hour here when, frankly, my kids were way, way better behaved with their nanny than they were with me. They wouldn't pull that stuff with the nanny. So I would, think, you know what, they're actually having a better experience with the nanny at that age because she has patience. Like this is her job. She's pushing them on the swing for an hour. I would be pushing for like, 3 minutes. Like, okay, we gotta go. We got things to do. So I felt,
I think that's
yeah, I would look at mothers who could do that and think, oh my gosh, like I'm kind of envious of that, but it just wasn't me.
mhm.
I just had a hard time and I, I look back and I don't actually regret anything because what's the point anyway? It's kind of a waste of time to
Right.
regret. But, I do see pictures of them when they were little and I think, oh, I mean, I'm sure you do that too. And you look at their little faces and you go, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
like, where is that little person? And you miss all those you miss all the special moments. But I had all those moments. So,
Right. But I think it's important too to like not like you can't overstate that like you can see the thing, right? Like you're being sold the picture, essentially you're being sold the picture and like when I become a mom, I'm going to do this and this. Like, the birds are going to land on the windowsill while I pull out a warm pie and like all this stuff and then they're born and you're like, "Okay, somebody left this chapter out of the what to expect when you're expecting because I feel like I got bait and switched
right.
and I don't love this part of the journey."
Right.
Like I have friends that are like newborn, it's terrible because they are like, I need to sleep. I cannot sleep. I cannot function. This is awful. But then they thrive when their kids are older.
Mm-hmm.
They're when they are running around and doing that because that aligns with them.
Right.
And I think that that idea of like you have to love every single minute of it, every single stage, every single age, or you're like doing it wrong is such garbage.
Oh God. I think
It's
back to when I was, my parents and the way they raised me, and they were not helicopter parents. My mom was the most loving mother. I mean, I felt nothing but love from my parents, but they weren't coddling us the way, parents go overboard today. They were, we were, it was just different back then. And so
Mhm.
I didn't feel any less loved. And I think that we're in a lot of ways doing our kids a disservice by being so overly perfect in everything that we do. That's just not life. That's not reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is that? The idea that like you're supposed to always be perfect. You're supposed to always be checking all the boxes in every category. Otherwise, like it's so black and white, and life is just not black and
No, I
white.
mean,
You
you're
know,
going to
things
kill
are.
yourself trying to be that way. Honestly, it's like,
Mhm.
it's very unhealthy. And kids are
Mhm.
resilient, and they're going to figure it out. In fact, the less you do for them, the better off they are, because they have to figure it out. I mean, my 19-year-old now is every day, because he's home from his junior college, and he'll say, "Well, what am I having for lunch?" I'm like, "I don't know, and I don't care. Figure it out." I'm not,
You need to feed
yeah,
yourself.
I'm not doing this. Sorry. Like, I've got something better to do.
The so when your oldest was a baby, then you had just like you were only a few years into having your own firm and getting that up and
Mhm.
running.
Yeah.
That's a grind. So did you go from was the idea to like do to stay the course that you did, right? Like to build that up and then have it transition that way where you end up bringing more people on, or did it just sort of like was the goal always to keep the career going so that you could get to this stage, or was it I want to have my own business and I want to do this and I want to see where it goes?
Yeah, I don't think I had a lot of, and now that I look back, yeah, I didn't have a plan in that way. What I liked about what I what I did and how working for myself, was that I could be at home, because I liked being at home with my kids, but having a nanny there, which I think is probably harder on the kids, because they see their mom, but then they're like, "Oh, there's my mommy, but she's not actually engaging with me."
Hmm.
But for me, I wanted to be near them. Like, I do feel for mothers who have kids and have to, leave the home and go to an office and be gone from, 8 to 5 or 6 at night, and then come home and have to do dinner and all that. And like, how do you grocery shop? And it's a lot. I liked that I could manage my own time, and that during the day I could run to the grocery store, or if there was a doctor appointment for my kid, I would take them. I had the flexibility of being able to be there whenever
Hmm.
I needed, and have control over my schedule. So that's really all I thought about it. I never wanted, in my mind, I had like one person that helped me, but I did most of all the work. And I only had enough, I had maybe 5 or 6 clients. So it was manageable for me to do on my own, and just have kind of an assistant. But
Hmm.
then it did just start growing, and I've been through a few different, iterations of it. I did have a business partner for a time, and that was great while that lasted. And then she moved on, and then I went back to just me. And then, I've had 6 or 7 people working for me at one time. I've gone through a bunch of different, you know, but a lot of different growth, experiences. And now it's almost like, not that I planned it, but I'm finally in this place where I feel like, this is what it all led to. Like, I have someone that
Hmm.
works for me that I love, that really runs the business day to day. I'm overseeing everything I bring in the business, but she's, doing all the client relations, media relations, and then she has people working under her, and she's amazing. She's just super smart, no drama. So it's almost like too good to be true.
Sounds
I'm going to knock on some.
that sounds very lovely.
Yeah. So
It's
I actually have a life outside of my job, and my kids. I'm able to make great money, but half of my day is doing things that I want to do. I just came back from going for a walk with my friend. I can go to lunch with people. So
sounds absolutely lovely.
yeah. So you eventually, but whenever I think, oh gosh, this like doesn't even feel right. Like, I'm making money, but yet then I think, no, I earned this.
But yeah, you worked for it.
Yeah, I was doing all the hard work. I did grind away and stress. And, I had all of those moments and for years and years. And now I'm kind of able to take on the role that I've always wanted to, which is more of like strategic and higher up. And so,
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, the idea of like, this is the place that you're at, and it's the place that you got yourself to. So it's not just like all things are like lining up. Like there is that piece. And I think too, like what you were saying before about having it look like everything is super balanced on paper, but the behind the scenes, I every once in a while I find this meme and I put it up on social media whenever I see it. It shows up in my feed, but it's the idea of like the duck floating on the water, and it's like the atop of the water is the duck very calm and looking around, and then underneath it's like these frantic legs paddling
right.
along, and it's like that is entrepreneurship at its best. If there's a mascot out there for that.
Yeah. And not even just being a parent too. That's kind of, you're always, I mean, I think, and we have a podcast that I don't know if you've listened to it, but it's called Stages of She, and it's me in my 50s and then a woman, Liz, in her 40s, and Sarah, who works for me, in her 30s. And the reason we started it is because we thought it's so interesting to hear, everyone's perspective about different, topics in life. And I really do feel in my 50s, like I have so much more wisdom about things than I did in my 30s and even in my 40s. And so you really, it's scary to turn 50 and be in your 50s, but it really is true when they say, the 50s, I think, could be the best because you really don't care anymore about you really just come into your own. You just start really trusting yourself and saying, wait a second, I've already been through all of these things. And you have history to go back on and see patterns, and you're able to really like figure out what's really important and what's a bunch of noise and fluff. And so I'm really liking this part of it. The aging part isn't so fun, but
I was gonna say you really get that cortisol way down. It's no longer like the fight or flight that you just sort of live in with new babies.
No,
young kids. It's getting a chance to like take a step back and look at the bigger picture in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and do you probably find too when you have 4 kids, don't you feel so differently by the time you have your third and fourth? I mean, you look at life so differently than you did when you just had your first.
When I went in
and what's not.
Yeah, I went into the hospital to have my last baby like 3 days before the pandemic. And I remember the poor labor and delivery nurse that was in there. Of course, this is my 4th baby. And I'm like, this is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Like I've done this before. I mean, fine. It's awful, but then it's done. Right. But I didn't know that like the woman who had come in before me was like she was in and delivered a baby in 15 minutes. And so like everyone was still kind of like all freaked out about that happening. And I went in and they were like, oh, you are 8 centimeters dilated. And I was like, excuse me? Like, what is happening here? And then all of a sudden, like everything's being dropped and like all of this. And I was like, oh, I guess this is different. And then fast forward, 48 hours later, I'm leaving and I'm like, this is going to be fine. Like I've already, look at all these other people I've kept alive. It's going to be great. And I went home and then the world shut down. And I was like, oh, this is new and different.
Everything's been different. It was probably kind of the ideal time, though, to be shutting down, having a new baby, right? Because you're just like, oh, there's nothing for me to do except, take care of this.
I was like, the world is on maternity leave with me, except I get to hold the baby, and everyone else is like, oh my God, everything is crazy.
Yeah, that was.
That was a wild time. I am really glad that time, I enjoyed parts of that time, but I am really glad that time is in the rearview mirror for sure. As things have gone on, like your business has gone through different iterations. Have you noticed trends in terms of like what people gravitate towards when it comes to like baby and family space, or like how things evolve over, or have things evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, so, back in the day when I had little babies and Aiden and A was, a brand new company, they were sort of on the forefront of, before them, your options were pale yellow, blue, and pink, and Winnie the Pooh. So
Mm-hmm.
Reagan, the founder of the company, she really, I think, kind of introduced this idea that you could have baby products that were sort of fashionable and pretty and things you wanted to see in your home. So things really started changing from that point forward, where everything became more sophisticated and a lot of brands came out with really expensive strollers, and it became more of a lifestyle fashion, statement,
Mm-hmm.
rather than us just clogging our houses up with a bunch of ugly, like
Plastic.
plastic, weird looking baby stuff. So that obviously has, just keeps evolving over time. Now, not so much I mean, yes, there's always new technology. The products today they're always getting better and better. But I think what the sort of the trend that I'm seeing is more about how women are looked at not just like as a mom, like, oh, you're a mom. Even, in when we're pitching products to editors, people are covering baby products in places where we didn't used to see that anymore. There used to be a ton of parenting magazines. Now there are really hardly any parenting magazines, but you'll see parenting products covered in Vogue and, more, lifestyle, online lifestyle sites. So it's like incorporating like women as, you're part of you as mom, but you're still a cool, fashionable woman who's into, healthy eating and yoga and whatever, and likes to read. And so I like that you're not just
Yeah.
stuck in this mom bucket, right? After you have a baby.
Yeah, you're not in the like, you were here and then you had a baby and now you have to go hide in your house for
Right.
like the
And
next
read,
18
yeah,
years.
and read parenting magazines and forget about,
Make jello.
your in style magazine or whatever. It's not even out anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think it's
I know. I
becoming
feel like,
just more mainstream, like a way of life. Dads are more involved. It's
yeah,
more of a
it's nice too, because then you have people that are like, I wonder if people, the idea of like, because it was so black and white, and when it came to like advertising and products and things like that, now when everything sort of exists on a spectrum or on a grayscale, where people that would think, oh, I don't want to do that, or that's not for me, now there's more opportunity. People feel like there's more opportunity to like still own that piece of yourself, because you see it in a place where it's accepted, right?
right.
It's like if you see it on the paper, like, yes, you can still read Vogue and identify with some of those parts, and you can still find this, and this. And like, your maybe your fashion statement moves from you to like the products that you buy
Hmm.
for your child,
Well, yeah,
which
we,
are
we
great.
we work with a lot of influencers in the parenting space, and these influencers are usually very, beautiful, fashionable women who are traveling to these amazing places and they're bringing their kids around. I mean, it all looks perfect, but we know it's not. But that's kind of the image that is being portrayed out there is, living this fabulous life with our kids in tow and they're all in their cute outfits and we're jet setting
Yeah.
around.
I feel like the next iteration of that, or like the
And,
next step on the evolution of it, is like when people really start to put the real piece out there, right? Like, it's like right now everything is very polished and everything is very like color coordinated. Like, what happens when you get to that third baby and the things that you used for the first and second, like they don't hold up, and now you've got mismatched things, and now it's like, all the things that, I mean, I made all the baby food for my oldest, and my third, I didn't even have the baby food thing anymore. It's like, I don't have time for
Yeah.
that.
You're
It's
like,
just not, it's not in my repertoire.
they eat off the
I'm
floor.
just wondering. My third ate out of the dog dish. Did not choke. But I just wonder, like, when is that going to be the next thing that comes down the line where people really start? Because there's that move in social media towards like, this is my real self, and will we get to that stage?
I hope. I've always been tell it like it is. I don't candy
Mm-hmm.
coat anything. I'm an open book, and I've never, I'm a positive person, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that in life you can look at something one way or you can look at it in another way, and what's the way that's going to make you feel better. So I always gravitate toward the better feeling thought, but I also think that women need to be honest and real about what life is like on a day-to-day basis, because
Mm-hmm.
it's only then we can realize that, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one here who's struggling or living this, life that feels chaotic or depressing sometimes, when you know that everybody's feeling this way, everybody's
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this. It's very comforting in a sense, and you feel like, even I read a ton of self, help empowerment books, personal growth, business growth books. And you realize that everybody has some imposter syndrome. Nobody really knows what they're doing. The people that
Mm-hmm.
become successful are the ones that just go for it and figure it out along the way. But when we see people that are very successful, we think, oh my gosh, you know, they must be so much smarter than I am, and they're not. They just actually
Mm-hmm.
just started to do something, and they had a bigger dream for themselves, one that we maybe haven't imagined. So,
Yeah. I follow Layla Hormozy on her podcast,
yeah.
and she and her husband, they have this business called Gym Launch.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not like of the fitness realm. I heard her as a guest on another podcast. And so they built this brand to $100 million
Wow.
valuation, and now they have something called acquisition.com, and it's $1 billion. Their aim is to build it into $1 billion portfolio, and it's the two of them together. And she is very much like one of those people that's like, I have imposter syndrome. Like, she was 20, I think it's like 27, 28 years old, and had $100 million net worth.
Wow.
And she was like, I'm scared every day. I get up every day and I'm scared. And she has like, she posts at least a couple times a week podcasts. They're short. They're like 15 or 20 minutes, but she talks about like business stuff, and a lot of it has to do with like mindset around imposter syndrome and stuff. And she's like, I'm scared. I hit go, I start talking, I like post it and then walk away. And she's like, if I didn't, I would just get stuck. Like, I'd be hiding in the corner
Right.
in my room, like not doing anything.
Yeah. And it's so
And it's
easy to
just
do
like,
that. It's just, think about the podcast that you're doing, and, the podcast that I have. We started it just kind of for fun, to see what it would be like. And we could have thought about it forever and just not have done it, just like you and doing your podcast. But you just start. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know if it's going to end up being a huge podcast. You almost can't even think about it. You just have to do it, and you will make mistakes. You will, nobody's great. Even, I don't know if you listen to Ed Milet, but he's somebody I listen to all the time. And he says, and he has like one of the number one podcasts in the world. So he says, but he says his his first season, he said it was terrible, and
You just keep going.
you just keep going, and that's how you learn and you get better. And people don't become successful overnight. We think they do, because once we know who they are, then we think, oh my gosh, they became successful overnight. But no, they were grinding away, making mistakes, probably being terrible at what they did for a long time, until all of a sudden it picked up traction. And he always says, people that quit are usually like one step away for, like the big break. People quit before, like when they've just about, had enough, and they think, oh, like, I should just stop this. They're usually like one phone call away, or one, episode away from getting to the next level.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. I definitely the planning for this podcast was years, and it wasn't necessarily years because it was like a fear of it. I mean, there's definitely that idea of like, okay, we have a microphone, I talk, will anyone care? Is anyone going to tune in? And then I started putting out there that guests, accepting guests and things like that, and just tried to sort of like, I hope I have 3 people, like maybe I'll do it once a month, whatever. And it was just dozens of people who were like, I want to talk about this. And so it's that idea, like, it just, why not? Like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst
Right.
that could happen is I just talk to myself.
Well, and you're getting to interview and talk to other, people and probably learning a lot from other people. And to me, I spent a lot of time wondering, what's my purpose in life? How do we know what are we supposed to do here? What is this all about? What does it mean? Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I have kind of come to the realization that I think my purpose is to connect with other women. Like, it doesn't always even have to be something so huge, we don't have to be the next Oprah Winfrey, but I feel the most fulfilled and lit up when I am connecting with other women and speaking, my, truth, and hopefully helping other people to not be so hard on themselves, to not take everything so seriously, and I don't know if I had only had one child that I'd be the person I am today. I would maybe be much more uptight and stressing about that one kid and making sure I did everything perfectly. But I think there's something about having, for me, 3 boys.
A pile.
Yeah, you really have to let go of so much that you created in your mind as what the perfect parent would be, and just get down to the basics,
Yeah. And I think that's where like all of the talk about imposter syndrome and feeling like paralyzed by not knowing what to do next is parallels with parenthood in the biggest way. That you can have absolutely no idea what you're doing. I mean, think about like how many people every day leave the hospital with their first baby and they're like, why do you let me leave? Like, why, whose idea was this? I signed this paperwork and like, I bring this human home with me, and that's what you have to do. You just have to like, some things you're bad at, some things you're not, some things you figure it out as you go. And it's the same evolution. Yeah, there is a life that is dependent on you not totally screwing it up. So you can't just like pack it in like a podcast, but it's just that idea of like, mistakes are good.
Yeah, but my mom used to always say to me, just, do you love your children? Of course I love my children. Okay, well, that's all that really matters. Because when you're coming from a place of love, you're doing the best that you can do. And you don't have to do everything perfectly. And you don't have to, obviously you have to feed them and clothe them and, take care of them in that way. But you don't have to make every single, basketball game. I see parents who just kill themselves to be at every single thing. And I say, I go to most, but you know what? If there's a basketball game and there's a fun function like someone's birthday lunch or even an amazing workout class that I really want to go to, I'm going to say, I'm going to do the thing for me first. Unless it's a big basketball game. It's like, I don't need to be at every single basketball game from kindergarten until they're 20. Like, the kids don't care. Right. It's me, parents, I think, put so much pressure on themselves thinking they're doing it for the kid. They're not. They're doing it for themselves because they don't want to miss out or because they feel guilty. So if you take away the guilt.
Where does that guilt?
Yeah, take away the guilt. I always say the first thing you feel when you have a baby, there's 2 emotions. One is a love you never knew before, and the second is guilt. Like the minute the baby comes out, even maybe when you're pregnant, you feel guilty. Like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing it right. I'm not, breastfeeding is hard, or my milk's not coming in, or they're crying. What did I do wrong? And you just have to realize that guilt is just such a silly, wasted, emotion because you're only doing it to yourself. Right?
Yeah. It's not like your kids, I mean, I don't think generally your kids are like taking attendance, of every single time. And that's the measure. Like we put so many like markers on ourselves that like that may, and too, like maybe some of that stuff comes from us and our experience. Like if I always wanted my parent to show up for this and they didn't,
Right.
it's that idea of like, what would have worked for me, maybe that's not the thing that my kid cares
Exactly.
about. So it's figuring out, because one of my kids would feel very differently about missing a performance. One of my kids will feel very differently about not getting picked up from school.
Right.
They all have their own
Right.
thing.
Right. So it is, you have to differentiate what is your own stuff and your own trauma and what is really, what do they care about? And I usually will ask my kid, hey, I'm thinking I have this other thing I kind of want to do, but if it's really important for me to beat your game, then I'll beat the game. I can tell in a second how they're going to, if they'll be like, oh, I don't care. Go do your thing. I'm like, okay, good. But if they say, well, then I'm like, I'm at the game. But I don't know. I think the guilty thing is just funny too, because as you get into the teenage years, they really, these kids are very smart and intuitive, and they know the things that are going to really like get to you. So they will throw things in your face, but they don't even really care about it. It's just a complete manipulation. So watch out for that.
I like the idea of asking them too,
Yeah,
like, because that really, especially, when you get stuck in your own head about something and you're like, oh, I have to do this, all of this, yada, yada. But you're asking them like, what works for you
yeah,
and what feels good for you. So then they don't in turn turn around and do this someday when
right,
they have kids, where they're like, well, my mom came to every single one of my basketball games ever, so I am doing it right only if I repeat this pattern,
exactly. Yeah,
versus I don't want to go to this, or I have another thing that conflicts with this. Do you care if I go or not? And then it becomes that conversation where you're showing your kids like, advocate for what
right,
you want, and if we can make it work together, then let's do that.
right. And you know that, I think girls are different than boys. I think because I have a lot of friends with daughters, and they will, their daughters seem a little more sensitive, or they're more emotional, but they tell their moms more, where boys they like grunt at you, they don't.
Mhm.
So I can tell though by their body language and just in their look or reaction to me, if like, oh shoot, I better go to that game. Or sometimes the opposite though. Like I feel like sometimes my husband and I will go to all these games, and my son will say, you know what, sometimes I actually feel stressed when you guys are at the game, because my husband's very into it and can be like, intense. So
Mhm.
sometimes we're going and doing all these things, and maybe they don't even really want us there. We're just doing it
Yeah.
again because we think it's the right thing to do.
But also good on them for being able
Yeah.
to say, and to like feeling comfortable
Yeah.
to say, not this one. I want to do this one on my own, and knowing what feels good and what doesn't feel good
Right.
for them.
And as a parent, not to have your feelings hurt. You
Yeah.
can't take things personally. I remember the first time my oldest son told me he hated me, and I was so upset. And I had a therapist at the time, and she said, congratulations. That means that he feels comfortable enough with you that he can tell you how he's, feeling. And it's not that he hates you, it's that he's so upset. He's trying to think of the meanest thing he can say. And he knows that he can say that to you and you're going to love him no matter what. And
And you're like, but still.
yeah, but you know what? Now it's so funny having three boys. It's like, I know they're not talking amongst each other, but they all say the same things at about the same age. It's like a program, an inner program. So with my
Mhm.
second and third, it's almost like I'm trying not to laugh on the inside. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. Like I know exactly what this is.
Let me guess.
Yeah, I've heard this. And they try to, really get to you. And you just
Mhm.
it's very nice though to once you don't take it personally. You're like, oh, okay, this is just part of the whole, growing up process and what they need to do to separate themselves from you. And you're allowed, you're supposed to let them do that and not
Mhm.
take it personally.
And so as they get older and you're moving towards having one, maybe two, not very long from now, off on their own, like what does that transition, how do you think that transition looks for you?
You know, I don't know. I always have felt like when it was really crazy, I just would think, "Oh god, I can't imagine like being sad when they go away because this is so hard."
Hmm.
And but now that I have two that drive themselves, I'm starting to see, oh wow, like my 17-year-old really doesn't need me at all except for making him a
Hmm.
doctor appointment or, making sure I have food in the refrigerator. He manages his whole life, his schedule is. And my little guy is pretty independent. And so I pick him up from school. So I've really been leaning into my own life again. So I feel like by the time they're gone, I'm very grateful that I've kept up all my, women relationships. I have lots of friends. I have lots of like activities, that I do outside of my children. And my husband and I have,
Yeah.
as I, mentioned earlier, like we have a lot of friends. We go places with them on the weekends. We have dinner plans all the time. So like we've really like it's going to be sad obviously because it's a piece of you that's leaving, but it's not like all of a sudden I'm going to be shocked like what am I going to do with myself? I think I'm like slowly kind of preparing for that. And maybe that's cuz I'm a little bit older, as a mom. Cuz by the time
But you're
Vince
also,
leaves, I'll be 60 years old. But which is
yeah.
scary to think about.
But you're also like, you're not waiting until your youngest leaves before you start
No.
your company. Like you're like right now, you're not
No.
sitting there thinking like, oh, someday I'm going to
No.
launch this and someday I'm going to do this because you kept that through line for all those years
Right.
going.
And I want my boys to see a mother who like has their own life, you know.
Hmm.
They know that they ask me now. It's funny, my older two ask me a lot about my business. They're always asking me questions like how many clients do you have now and what kind of revenue do you make and what do they're trying to like in their minds figure out, what do I want to do when I'm older? And so they're very interested in what I do. And I think they're like proud of me. They're proud of that they have a mom who's got a career. And I think it's really good for them to see like a woman living their own lives and not just, you know, sitting around living through them and
Hmm.
doting on them
Right.
constantly.
Not going to the basketball game because that's the thing.
Yeah, and
That's the event of the
I've
week.
been to like 6 basketball games this week. So when I say, I mean, it's like if I'm not going to a basketball game, it's because I've already been to like 7 of them.
Because you've just left a basketball game.
Exactly. When you have 3 kids that play basketball and it's basketball season, there's a game 1
Oh.
or 2 every day. So it's not like once a week I get one basketball game and I don't go. It's
Hmm.
it's like nonstop. And then there's football and, so I go to the football games and you could be doing that.
On this the treadmill, the like sports treadmill, season to season.
Yes. Yes.
And
But, it's good for boys to be busy in sports. So we keep them
it keep them going, keep them tired, keep
keep
them
them out of
tired and fed.
trouble, especially when teenagers. It's like the best thing ever. They have to play a high school sport.
Hmm.
You have to insist on it.
Keep them occupied.
Yeah, because they have practice after school. They're like training. They get into their bodies. They want to go to the gym. It really builds like a healthy mindset.
I think too, also the important part is like learning how to schedule your own stuff. Like you said, two of them, they do their own
Right.
schedule and all of that stuff. It's like you learn that from participating in sports, because if you don't have that structure of having to be ready for something, then you are constantly like,
Right.
okay, what do I do now? That idle time.
Yeah. No, idle time. What is it? Idle time, idle minds. It's not a,
Idle hands.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not good. Too much time on your hands.
No.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. It was really lovely and amazing to hear another mom say, you've got to keep yourself on the map. And I think that it's really important for people that have, new babies, young babies, all the way up through to really have to hear as many stories as possible about people that continue to say, no, this is what I wanted to do as well, and figuring out how to make that work. And it's going to look different for everyone, but I really appreciate you sharing your story and your perspective today.
I think, to anyone listening, if they did have small babies, my last piece of advice would be keep your girlfriends sacred, always keep up with those friendships, but don't get sucked into the mommy cliques at school. I have found maybe one or two really good friends out of each sort of kids, friend group. I never got involved in big mom groups that were going to dinners and, lunches. And I find those can be a lot of energy and a lot of, pettiness. But I kind of would find my people, and then you really just make the most of those relationships, because women, the ones that you can really be real with and just tell it like it is, they're going to be like your lifeline.
Yeah, I think I cannot echo that enough. You've got to, I always say to my kids, I would rather you had one person who knew you for you, and one person who's going to show up for you, and one person that you're going to show up for, than having 100 friends or acquaintances, because it's that being seen and being held for exactly who you are. That's more important than how many phone numbers are in your phone.
Right. And when they're young, it's hard for them to really understand that. And they go through all these phases, they might have a best friend one year, and then the next, year it's a different best friend. But as we get older, relationships take work, and they take nurturing, but a real friend isn't someone that should feel like work, right?
Yeah.
When a relationship feels like work, then that's your red flag.
Flying high, waving in the air. Well, if I have listeners on here that are from all sorts of ages and stages, but if there is somebody on here who is looking for PR help, can you let everyone know where they can find you and how to get in touch with you and all of that?
Yeah, it's great. We're godfreysocialpr.com, and we are on Instagram, Godfrey Social PR. We have a podcast, Stages of She. And we're pretty easy to find. And we'll have to have you on our podcast, Tosh.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds amazing. I am there for all of those stages. I will put all of the contact info in the show notes. So thank you again for coming on, and enjoy all the basketball.
Yeah, I know. We got one this afternoon.